Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void live here on the Fringe FM. Whoa. All right, we got a late start. We're going to finish this Astral Doorways book. I usually don't try to get a book done in like 4 or 5. This is crazy. I don't know why this book is taking so long. 4 or 5, I guess you could say, broadcasts that we've done to do the book. Big shout out to Michael Domek. Thanks for your support, brother. Appreciate it. You guys go check out and give One-on-One podcast a follow and the One-on-One Media. He invited me to play with him for the launch of Destiny 2. So I went over there and played with him. We got lucky. We actually got to play some levels, but it's captivating, right? The whole light and the dark and Yakin and Boaz and all the occult symbols that are in this game. We got lucky and we got to play a little bit, but I got to tell you, I've never seen such just a devastating failure of a launch in my life. I don't know if it's because there's so many people playing it, but the servers are just crashing left and right. We got kicked and we still had fun though. I mean, we had a blast, so it's always fun. Juan's got a great sense of humor and a great attitude about a lot of things, so that's why I love the guy. So go check him out at One-on-One Podcast and his gaming channel, the One-on-One Media. Of course, here at Lighting the Void, give us a subscribe and follow. Social media podcast, all that stuff. Just search Lighting the Void. No one's taken that name yet, so that's really all you got to search. So where we left off on this one. What's up, Jess? Speaking of which, Jess Rogi's coming back into the Fringe FM fold. They just got back from Contact in the Desert, and she will be back on the airway shortly whenever she is ready. And we're glad to have her back. She's always family. Always have a spot for her. What's up, Pepe? Is it Pepe? Am I saying that right? Pepe? Genevieve. Hey, it's good to see you guys. Word salad. All right. So we're in this realm of conscious exploration the practical way. Now, I would say, based on the fact that Terrence Howard, Billy Carson, all these people are on Joe Rogan now, that we're in a new era. So we've intellectually got it. I mean, I wouldn't say that as far as like for the truth-seeking side of things or trying to get people to act morally on that spiritual side of things. That still ain't happening. We still got a lot of selfish agendas going on and lots of manipulation and all kinds of stuff. But that's more on the conspiracy side of things. But it's really also on the spiritual side of things. So it needs to be taken into consideration. But we're not talking about that tonight. I'm not going to go on a rant on why people should just treat other people right. I guess I don't want to go on a rant about growing up when I'm 42 years old. Pissed off because I can't get into a freaking Destiny 2 video game online. All right. So, but what we are getting ready for, I think, is conscious exploration on a practical level like we've never seen before. So, a few milestones that have happened that I can say why I think this is happening. All the people that are going on Rogan that he probably would have never had on there to begin with, I would say never. But they're there talking about these things. 2, as far as magic and the occult goes, there are people making YouTube channels that I thought would stay behind the scenes forever, and I'm glad that they're out. A caller called in last week and mentioned it. Liam Thomas Christopher has his own channel out now, the author of Kabbalah Magic and the Great Work of Self-Transformation. So, what I'm saying is that if you want to understand some of this stuff, like the out-of-body experience, astral travel, how magic works, or the consciousness, or the placebo effect, or Carl Jung, or whatever you want to know. It's out there to learn. There's really no secrets left. So I'm hoping that once, I don't want to go on too big of a rant here, but I'm hoping once everybody gets their brains wrapped around the knowing of something or the information, then we can be a little bit more wise. And I'm talking to myself too. So wisdom is applied knowledge. And where we like to go into the void here is conscious exploration for real on a practical level, whether that be astral travel, the out-of-body experience, remote viewing, meditation, magic, all of the stuff that people either don't believe in or are afraid of or are very curious about. And it's going to be hard, but I'm going to try to stay on the subject, even though we will talk a little bit like ancient aliens and ancient history and stuff like that too as well. But this book that was written in the 70s, you have to remember, I wonder sometimes if these guys like Monroe and the author of this book, J.H. Brennan, I wonder what they would say if they made it to 2024 and looked around. I mean, got online and just saw all of the stuff that's being talked about now. Would they be happy? I don't know. But we did go over in the previous 4 episodes the elemental doorways, known as the tattwa cards. We're talking about scrying here, being able to use flashing tattwa cards to scry into them to be able to move into the astral realm. We talked about the tarot, using tarot cards to scry with, the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, the I Ching, hypnosis, understanding hypnosis. So towards the end of this book, what he's moving into, and he's doing it very delicately. I like how he does it, J.H. Brennan. So he's going from the astral realm and the etheric body being subjective to objective. In other words, it's not just like something that we perceive or something that we think about or something that might be real. Like it actually exists and it's objective enough for him to say it's a fact. Now, I don't know. Wherever we left off on this book is where I left off. I promise you that. I'm just assuming that's where he's going to take it. I want to give a big shout out to Gareth too. I hadn't reached back to him. He's still fighting the good fight. But he's got his caretaker reading all kinds of books that we talk about on here. And I would love to have him on the show so we could talk, because Gareth can't really communicate over a mic, but not real well. But it would be cool to have him on, but I think he's a little shy. But I just wanted to give both you guys, Gareth and his caretaker, Richard, a shout out. So let's jump into this, because we started late. It's already 22 minutes in. You know. What's up, Ava? Okay. So he goes on to say, the objective astral realm. And here's a quote by John Simmons. The objective astral, the astral light, is beyond the range of our senses, but its existence is suggested by mysticism, psychology, and new physics. John Simmons, Magic and Mysticism. That's a fact. It's beyond the range of our current senses, but it is only suggested by mysticism, psychology, and physics. So he opened up this book with a quotation from the magician, previous ceremonial magician, Eliphas Levi. And he did this in subsequent chapters. And he says, I've tried to narrow the credibility gap it must have produced, but by now my own reports and any experiments you may have tried with the astral doorways should have persuaded you that there is more to the astral plane than mere imagination. But if the astral plane is not just imagination, then what is it exactly? This is not easy to answer. And the answers that might be given are difficult to prove, except in the manner that puddings are proved. I think we read part of this before we had to go. But the standard occult answer requires a modification of the basic diagram, which appeared in chapter 1, and we showed you that kind of like prism diagram with the self above it. But now he looks at the astral plane as it extends to the physical and the mental world, and it's touching both worlds. And it's now seen as touching the physical as well as the mental. And it has become, if you like, the imagination of matter. So think about the divine creator's imagination of everything that's so everything that we perceive as solid. Just like everything that comes into existence was once an idea or a thought, right? So how did it get here? Well, in the astral realm, all the blueprints of everything in reality is in this realm, is what he's saying. Let me skip this part here. I've noticed this term used more than once in occult literature. It is expressive but unfortunate. The connection is too easily made that occultists believe matter to be sentient. Like animism, like everything's alive. Hell, my TV's alive. It's got a consciousness or something, you know. I don't know about all that, but a difficult proposition to back up. It might be easier to suggest that various physical features like trees, streams, mountains, produce automatic stresses in the astral by reason of their existence. But this no more introduces sentience than the fact that a mountain can influence an air current. You know, animism is the idea that, like, I'm probably going to butcher this, but the idea that everything physical has a consciousness, like even the grass. I would say for the most part, when you cut the grass, you know, it puts off all these allergenic stuff that kind of swells you all up. To me, I look at it as like the grass is pissed off. But is it conscious? I don't know. Although the definition of the astral plane has now been extended, its essential nature remains unchanged. It is still a fluid plastic medium, having no form in itself, but capable of taking any form impressed on it and capable of giving form to underlying forces. Earlier, these forces were considered to be mental. Now, we accept the possibility that physical forces can work on the astral as well. From this viewpoint, many a magical operation suddenly starts to make sense. The ceremonial magician or the ritualist words of power, for instance, or witchcraft's chanted spells involve, at the very least, the production of sound wave patterns. At the very least. Sound can shatter a wine glass, draw patterns on a plate of sand, or if you happen to accept the story, demolish the walls of Jericho. It's not too difficult to suppose it might also influence the astral plane. Repeated movements may do the same, reinforced by imaginative workings of the magus. The possibility lies behind all magical ceremonies. Occultists make one further postulate that influence works two ways. Matter acts on the astral plane to produce patterns of change. So when we, let's just say, do and act, anything we do here produces wave patterns into the astral plane. But patterns that are already in the astral plane will also produce changes in the material world. So what you got, and I think I talked about this last week, we're just rehashing real quick, but you got this feedback loop of consciousness, right? Imagine it like like a figure eight. So you could say the bottom of the figure eight is the physical world, and it's vibrating its thing, and the top of this figure eight is like the astral world or whatever. Right there where those two circles meet is where we call the praxis or the placebo effect, or the doorway to the spiritual world. That's where that exists. And both realms are affecting each other. Just like, you know, how Howard was talking about how electricity and magnetism are both working together to create reality. So is the physical and the astral. So in other words, this isn't saying that if you just make a wish that it's going to come into reality. Even if you have a vivid imagination and you really visualize something that you really want, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to come into reality. I know that he talks about the inside of a TV. He can explain it, or he can tell you what's in there, but he can't really tell you how it works. So the position with the astral magic is exactly the same. Without proper training and the detail of an astral operation, the tyro is in a similar position to the cargo cultist who builds a wooden runway to attract the great metal birds full of white man's goodies. A detailed examination of astral magic is beyond the scope of this book. That sucks. I wish he would have got into it. If you will forgive a curious statement, I think some of the other possibilities are a lot more important than producing miracles with which to amaze your friends. So if you guys remember, he goes on to explain, because I'm not going to read everything that we read last week, but he goes on to explain that it's not levels like you got the physical world, then you got the astral world, then you got the mental world. It's not levels like stacked on top of each other. It's more like a sphere or an onion. And so it's easier, and he's not saying that's reality either, it's just easier to look at it that way to understand it. So the physical world is in the center, like the densest matter you can get in this sense of the word, in this concept. And then the astral lies just on the outside of that. And on the tree of life, you'll see it in layers like Malkuth, Yesod, that kind of thing. Or the four worlds. It all kind of works together. And then as vibration gets thinner and thinner, or energetic vibration, it goes from really dense to material to astral to mental and to spiritual. So he says a discussion on the true nature of God, stripped of its emotional content, is a discussion about the meaning of the word God and nothing else. And exactly the same difficulty and a very similar emotional content presents itself when you use a word like spiritual. All of which leads me to define what I mean by the word. If your first reaction is to disagree, remember that the subject of disagreement is the word, not the reality. The spiritual plane is to the mental plane what the mental plane is to the astral plane. It is perfectly permissible to consider the astral plane as billows of fine matter. And from this viewpoint, the mental plane, the psyche, is held to be composed of finer matter still. And from our definition, the spiritual plane is composed of the finest matter of all. It is equally permissible, although slightly abhorrent to me, to consider the astral plane as a level of higher vibration. The mental plane is even higher still, and the spiritual plane becomes the highest. Now, these are all mystic, all of these, this kind of runs across the board, whether it's magic, mysticism, even spirituality or whatever. Let's see. He says, I kind of like this. He says, it seems to me very evident that in the astral, we're dealing with a state totally alien to the physical, like just something unknown. As such, the only worthwhile way to consider it seems to be as a different reality we can experience, but not measure. Ideally, the position should be left at that. Well, yeah, it's a state of consciousness. That's why none of it makes sense. It's not linear. It's not even 3D. The human mind has a tendency towards analogy. That's right. We like formulas. We like things to make sense. And if they don't, then they don't exist. It's not real. Or a lot of us are polar. It's either this or that. It can't be a gray area. It can't be our brains can't comprehend it. So the mental plane will be described as finer or higher than the astral, and the spiritual plane will be thought of as a finer or higher still. Although these ideas communicate something, they still amount to saying, I don't know, blue is finer than green, or scarlet is redder than crimson. So how do we get out of this maze? The way out of the maze is to remember you have direct experiences with both the astral and the mental planes. Note the connection between the two and form your own link by analogy with the spiritual, but do not try to put your conclusions into words. Once you do so, you're back in the maze again. So he's saying don't try to put words on it, which is hard. But this is what I mean by void walking or exploring things practically. there are certain things that I know it's hard to believe, especially in this day of content generation, but there are certain things that you're not going to learn without experiencing them. And secondly, another reason why you're not going to learn them is because there's no way to describe the experience other than experiencing the experience. And you can bet if you're having an experience like I'm talking about, it's going to involve some metaphysical stuff. Whether it's DMT or an out-of-body experience or a level of consciousness that you obtained at some point through your explorations or void walking, that you've tried to put into words 1,000 times, but you can't to anybody. Matter of fact, you sound crazy when you try to do it, so you don't do it. Anyways, let me pass these levels of vibration. We talked about the onion. So, he said, these are not, of course, geographical locations. The astral does not circle the universe as the Van Allen belt circle the earth. In this realm, you are dealing with a different state of affairs. And once you pass through a doorway, you have entered a non-geographical space. You've also, by the looks of things, managed to sidestep time. If you've already tried an astral trip or astral travel, the chances are you'll have noticed a distortion in your time sense. I once guessed at 20 minutes for an inner journey that lasted objectively an hour and a quarter. And this may, of course, be simple disorientation, but disorientation does not explain how 2 journeys predicted that guy he talked about, where he went to South America and Bia von Vliet, or whatever her name was, tapped into the astral realm as well and saw him going there before it ever happened. So with this sort of picture, then, you have layers of pseudospace extending 4-dimensionally into pseudo-time, wrapped around, or more accurately, intermingling with the physical plane. So it's assumed that each layer can interact on the other, with automatic interaction strongest at the closest point of contact. Am I losing you guys? Yeah. Hey, what's up, Dan? Good to see you, brother. Yeah, you probably have read this. This book it came out in the 70s, but it's pretty popular too. So it's called Astral Doorways by J.H. Brennan. Let's see. Well, this sort of picture, yeah, a fairly natural series of subdivisions follow these ideas. But he's saying here, with this sort of picture, then you have layers of pseudospace extending 4-dimensionally into pseudo-time, wrapped around, or more accurately, intermingling with the physical plane. So it is assumed that each layer can interact on the other, like a Rubik's Cube almost, with automatic interaction strongest at the closest point of contact. A fairly natural series of subdivisions follows like this. The part of the astral realm that's closest to Earth takes on form from earthly influences. Part of this form is purely a mirror image of physical conditions, but the remainder is the form aspect of emotional thoughts from Earth's inhabitants. Really? So let's say you're astral traveling, and just as you go through the doorway, which makes sense, the physical realm, or you might see the physical realm, or a mirrored image, or I guess an imprint of the physical realm, or the blueprints to the physical realm. And then as you keep traveling into the astral realm or consciously exploring it, this turns into just crazy shit, because it went from, that point of contact into the emotional realm, which is chaotic. Physics maintain this lower astral level is not very pleasant. Unless your view of mankind is very naive, you'll have no trouble realizing why. Beyond the lower astral, conditions grow more attractive. Here, the major automatic influences come, as it were, from above, and since the level above is that of an abstract thought, the higher astral forms tend to be cleaner in the artistic rather than the moral sense and better organized. Like the astral, the mental plane may be subdivided. The lower mental receives a feedback from the astral, giving some form to its abstractions, and then the higher mental plane is influenced by the spiritual, producing such curiosities as intuition and certain forms of genius. Any readers that read occultism may protest that other sources give a different number of astral levels. Like a sevenfold division is quite popular, especially in the East. But it must be remembered that any dividing lines are pretty much arbitrary because it's all kind of blends and squishes together. They're conveniences rather than representations of reality. So you place them where they do most good to personal understanding. However, subdivided, you can see from our new diagram that the road to the spiritual potency lies through the astral plane. The mystic takes a bypass to these heights. The ceremonial magician with a different temperament takes the astral road, but both are heading to the same direction. See, it's really cool to me that this guy back in the 70s doesn't even have a polar mindset. Because I've seen this where, mystical spiritual people will argue with magicians like Christians will argue with atheists. Well, mysticism is the way, and no, magic is the way. And unfortunately, it never works out, that argument, where both ways lead to the same thing. All leads to the same thing. So where we left off, actually, after I burned 40 minutes of recapping and pretty much reading the chapter over again, is we left off on astral spirits. We were talking about astral entities. And he started that chapter with Carl Jung is somewhere quoted as saying that no one could or should waste energy denying the existence of the gods when they could be given their attention to investigating forces which behave exactly as the gods were once reputed to behave. So if you guys understand what he's saying there? So if you spend most of your time arguing about who is God, what is God's name? Or is Thor an actual god? Or what about Ganesha? Or what about Ishtar? Are these real gods? What's their real name? What's the etymology and all this stuff? Instead of actually looking into nature or in the physical world and looking in the astral world as to what forces correspond with those gods, that's more important than, the concepts and things that are happening, the actual messages and correspondences and all that, instead of trying to figure out who exactly is this God. It's a waste of time, he says. It is good advice, and I intended sticking to it. I said my little bit for the objective astral in the last chapter. Whether you accept the possibility is your own affair. If in the present chapter you prefer to think of spirits as semi-autonomous complexes, that too is your own affair. My concern is purely to describe a few of the entities that you may possibly meet on astral wandering, subjective or objective. First, there are the nature spirits. I think I read this part too. Sorry, but it's good to go over it again. These have been named by folklore and are closely associated with the elements. They're the four broad divisions: the earth gnomes, the sifs, the air sifs, the fire salamanders, and the water undines. And under the same categories comes things like elves, sprites, fairies, brownies, and I've never heard of brownies before, brownies and all that stuff. They are astral expressions of natural forces, manifesting as entities of greater or lesser power. So I guess what he's saying there is, like, if you're astral traveling, instead of going around looking for a damn gnome, well, where's the earth gnomes? Let me see the gnomes. The idea is you can use, I'm not saying they're not real, okay? That's not what I'm saying. But if you do enough astral travel, you'll realize that there is something controlling that element. And there is layers of, I guess you could say, a pecking order that's going on. So somewhere along the line, they called them gnomes. Could be real. Doesn't really matter, though. What's important is understanding how it works. The dominant characteristic of these creatures is single-mindedness. Their actions are severely limited to their own concern. They don't care and are beyond good and evil in the sense that they are neutral. They have totally fixed behavior patterns. And set over the elemental creation are the elemental kings. You read a lot about the elemental kings in a lot of occult books. But the inner hierarchy is a reflection of physical facts such as hurricanes and the domination of breezes in its paths. And since the elemental kings represent the elements in their broader, wilder sense, they are associated with great power and can be difficult to control. For this reason, they tend to be feared in lots of occult quarters, as they should be. As they should be. But their essential nature is still neutral, and only their misdirection will produce evil results. In accordance with the nature of the astral plane, thought forms also occur widely. These are mainly very transient, but there are one or two exceptions. Single-minded concentration plus emotion builds up an entity known as an elemental, which reacts according to the nature of the emotions involved. There is usually a feedback process to the physical form of an artificial elemental, and this is the reason why crowd behavior differs so greatly from the behavior of the individuals who go to make it up. It is kind of stupid, isn't it? You could talk to 200 individuals. They could all be good people, smart as a whip, whatever. You put them in a crowd, turn on some music, or put them in a certain scenario, and they act bonkers. Why is that? Kind of like he's saying here, a striking example is the lynch mob. The crowd concentrates with emotion on a single subject, the prisoner. An artificial elemental comes into being and begins a feedback of the hate which it produced. The emotion grows stronger and stronger. So it's charging, right? The emotion. It grows stronger and stronger until it discharges in the murder of the prisoner, which is the releasing of the energy. Fortunately, the elemental of a loosely knit group like a mob is short-lived. It starves to death when the mob disbands. You can see the same thing happen in biology too, in nature. So given the same basic ingredients, hopefully with a less destructive emotion, an organized group tends to build an elemental with greater permanence. The feeling of awe which clings to an empty cathedral is an example of a powerful elemental built by ritual. And just like if you set up your own ritual space, as you start doing your ceremonies in there and putting up your symbols and all these different things that you need to correspond with your unconscious, it's going to start building up its own energy too. So, the spasmodic aura of our wrath may possibly be the remnant of elementals building in the distant past. Many of these entities are formed. Wait, why did it just jump from ritual to a spasmodic being? Feeling of awe which clings to an empty cathedral is an example of a powerful elemental built by ritual. The spasmodic aura of our wrath, and he spelled that wrong, may possibly be the remnant of elemental buildings in the distant past. I don't know. That's a big left turn there, wasn't it? But many of these entities are formed quite unconsciously. But a skilled occultist might sometimes use the same ingredients to produce an elemental for some purpose of his own. Again, this is neutral. But its purpose may be good or evil, depending on the intention of the operator. And its nature may be love or hate, depending on the emotion which gave it birth. I mean, this is what happens when I do a show on Thursday. I play freaking video games all weekend. Try to catch up on work, and I'm pretty much talking about what we talked about last week, rehashing. G'day, peeps. What's up, Sudi? Pretty trippy, though. So he goes into the shells. These are forms taken on by independent entities, including humans, in order to operate on the astral and subsequently discard it. So a trained occultist will destroy his shell after use. I don't think you should be making shells, but if that's just my opinion. But if he does not, it tends to disintegrate of its own accord. Although giving an immediate appearance of individuality, it is a mindless form and generally quite harmless, although some develop obsessing qualities for a time. Occasionally, these shells are picked up by sensitives or mediums and mistaken for ghosts. A residue of personality characteristics may give them an appearance of sentience, but any communication with them is flat, colorless, and benign. With the shells, there are sometimes actual ghosts. The human personality will usually spend a period on the astral after death. The inner spirit clothes itself in astral substance, usually modeled on the physical body, and operates temporarily in a dream world. Again, mediumistic contact is possible and indeed appears quite common. And since the ghost's astral environment is usually built up quite unconsciously and tailored to the individual outlook, description of post-mortem states drawn from these sources tend to vary widely. I think you'll find that that's true, especially if you read Robert Monroe's books, because depending on who he ran into in the astral realm, when he ran into these beings or whatever they were addicted to or believed, or I guess you could say their construct or their map and model of the world, it affected their astral experience tremendously. So, a standard magical technique is to build a suitable astral form in the hope of the expectation of attracting a higher force into it. And since the form can be built from above as well. Hold on, I skipped a spot here. Damn it. If a soul does not reincarnate, it will eventually pass beyond this astral dreamland. At the stage, a further interesting possibility arises. If the soul is sufficiently evolved, it can create an astral body to be worked by remote control, as it were. Damn, a remote control astral body. This establishes the possibility of communication with highly evolved entities on the common ground of the astral plane. A standard magical technique is to build a suitable astral form in the hope and expectation of attracting a higher force into it. And since the form can be built from above, it is true to say the various angelic and archangelic hierarchies, along with pagan gods and elder brethren of evolution, may also be experienced here. But the plane is not their natural habitat any more than it's yours or mine. The relevant astral levels can be keys to such curiosities as telepathy. But the establishment of telepathic rapport is on par with finding a particular stranger in a city the size of Tokyo. It can happen by pure luck, but the chances are all against it. The astral realm is also the home of the Akashic Records, the mysterious book in which, according to occultists, all facts are written. Why this is so easy to see when you remember the astral extension through time. The medium takes on an impression of events, so that it is only a question of hitting the right level to produce the relevant information. It sounds to me like you're playing with a lot of stuff here without fully understanding it, though. He goes on to say, I rashly wrote only, but of course this operation is as tricky as telepathy without training. And probably the easiest tap to the Akashic is through psychometry. To some people, this is a natural aptitude. Others require training because of its associations with the astral plane. A simple training system for this talent is given in this book. If you've been paying close attention, it may by now have occurred to you that if angels can build astral bodies, so can demons. Do you think that's what angels and demons are, though? just metaphysical concepts moving around in consciousness in the universe, and they decided that they were going to, I don't know, they were going to create bodies. Like, I'm going to call myself Raphael, and I'm going to look like this. And I'm going to put wings and robes on, and I'm going to have a very, very hermaphroditic look about me. You won't be able to tell if I'm a boy or a girl. Do you think that's what happened? I think he's stabbing a little bit here. I get where he's coming from. Like, it makes sense because you don't communicate the same with certain beings in the astral. You don't even talk. You don't see them. They're invisible, some of them. So I guess in theory, you could make a body in the astral realm because you can create anything you want. I don't know. It gets pretty crazy in there. That's why I like a systematic code of things. That's why I use the tree and, the elements, the planets, astrology. Use all that stuff for a map. Okay. So once you abandon superstition and romantic fiction, the problem of the infernal hierarchies become quite as difficult to understand as understanding angels. What's worse, the investigation of these levels brings painful results. Investigation of these levels brings painful results. It is as well to leave the demons to Dennis Wheatley and take some consolation from the knowledge that demoniac contact on the astral is quite unlikely. Demoniac. That's not how you spell demonic. There's a lot of typos in here. Rather more likely, and almost as frightening, is the possibility of contact with one's own archetypes. That'll scare the hell out of you. Confrontation with personified personal unconscious contents can often have a salutary effect. This is one reason why self-knowledge is so important for an astral traveler. It is the ultimate defense against your own worst enemy, which we all know who that is, don't we? It's you, MFer. Your own worst enemy is yourself. Yeah. All right. So this next part of this book is heightening the astral experience. Milarepa and his Himalayan cavern and the anchorites of the Thebaid followed essentially the same procedure and got essentially the same results. Aldous Huxley, Heaven and Hell. There are, as Huxley discovered, a multitude of ways to heighten the astral experience. Many of them are bizarre, and many of them are dangerous. But all of them bear testimony to mankind's fascination with his visions. When using the elemental doorways, members of the Golden Dawn were taught to use certain divine names in order to give the visions life. That's true. The names chosen were, in each case, associated with the element concerned, and these are as follows. For Earth, the god name was Adonai Ha-Aretz. The archangel was Oriel, and the regular angel was Forlak. For air, the god name was Shaddai El-Kai. The archangel was Raphael, and the regular angel was Chasan. For the element of water, the god name was Elohim Sabaoth, and the archangel's name was Gabriel, and the regular angel name was Teliahad. Teliahad. That sounds a little elvish to me. And, of course, I'm just playing here. The fire element, the god name was Jehovah Sabaoth, or Yod-He-Vav-He Sabaoth, or the archangel Michael, and the regular angel was Arel. To make full use of the names requires training. A measure of their potency springs from associated ideas. The building in of these associations to members' minds was an important part of the fraternity's curriculum. But even without training the names will produce a degree of automatic reaction. And for that reason, the technique of using them is given. First, since the names are Hebrew transliterations, why is he using bigger words than necessary? Hebrew translations. He put Hebrew transliterations. And since the names are Hebrew transliterations, like, you don't have to use bigger words than necessary. Anyways, first, since the names are Hebrew translations, a guide to pronunciation will be useful. And this way he has a guide to pronouncing them. If you want to know how to pronounce these names, you can grab my downloads too in the Patreon store, or you can become a member for just $10 a month. It'll give you access to all of those. But I don't just have the Golden Dawn angelic names in there. I have the Christian one, the Christian version of everything. If you're scared, you know, you got the shamanic version of everything, all audio guided, Latin, Egyptian, Greek even. I got a buffet of magical audios and names to use for this stuff. So after passing through the doorway, each name associated with the element is sounded 3 or 4 times in the order God, name, archangel, and angel. The sounding is not done in normal tones. In the technical term of magic, the names are vibrated. To vibrate a word may take a little practice, but it usually comes easily enough. First, speak the word slowly, aloud. Then try to produce the same sounds as far back in the throat as possible. It should be guttural, actually. This will probably involve dropping the pitch of the voice. The idea is to produce a resonance, or a wavelength. An approach midway between singing and chanting may be useful. Yeah, I've found that guys that have a deeper voice, or just guys, period, if you come from the gut and you vibrate it like monk style, that puts out a good vibration. The magic that I've done with women that have done this, especially traditional, unless they got a deep voice, which happens, you know, it happens to some women, but when they sing it, it sounds better. When it comes out with a more feminine tone, you know, it's still got a vibration or a wave to it, which all sound does anyways, but you could put some stank on it. Give it a little bit more cowbell when you do it. Shit. Hey, Joe, have you ever heard anyone else talk about those blobby Rorschach things that pushed you back into your body? Yeah, a couple people. Actually, Monroe kind of mentioned, not to the exactly those things, but I've talked to a couple people that have mentioned something like that. Even in this book, he talked about, you know, beings that, because they're kind of in certain realms, let's say closer to Earth, not so far out in the astral, but closer to the physical, they're not exactly solid, so they kind of look weird. But have I heard anybody describe them to the T like I talked about? No. So the idea is to produce a resonance when you vibrate with your voice. It's easy to judge when you have succeeded. You'll actually feel the resonance. I've heard some books call it intonation and things like that. But for astral travel, you'll need no more than a general vibratory effect. You don't have to go crazy. This Golden Dawn technique does not, of course, involve trance, but it is true to say that most other techniques do to some degree or other. As a consenting adult, you may take your choice. As someone with little practical experience, I should underline the fact that trance is not a plaything. If you must risk any of the following, make sure someone is with you at all times, and for preference, make sure that someone is a doctor. A few years ago, scientists working under the auspices of the United States Navy set out to discover the effect on the human mind of total stimulus withdrawal. The first experiments involved shutting volunteers in a lightproof, soundproof room too small to allow major movement. The walls were padded, and the volunteers wore padded clothing, including gloves, to cut down tactile sensations. And later, the procedure involved suspending the volunteers underwater so that the few remaining areas of touch, the slight sensation of the body pressed against the bed, for instance, virtually disappeared. Most of the volunteers, did you guys know about this? Most of the volunteers followed the same pattern. The only essential difference was the time taken to reach the various stages. First, they would catch up on sleep. Then, sometime after consciousness returned, they would start to become restless. The restlessness was followed by increasing disorientation, and this finally gave way to hallucinations. The hallucinations were invariably of a vivid kind. Their nature was more curious than anything else. One volunteer reported watching a naked man with a soldier's tin helmet perched on his head row a bath across the volunteer's line of vision. On the basis of the experiment's attentive theory was formed that, given the trying conditions, the volunteers endured, but one half of the brain produced amusement for the other through the hallucinations. So far as I know, no analysis was made of the hallucinatory content. And without such an analyst, it is dangerous to draw too many conclusions. But there are very obvious parallels between what happened to the volunteers and what used to happen in pre-invasion Tibet to certain Himalayan hermits. The Tibetan holy men deliberately had themselves bricked into tiny cells set up high in the mountains. Food was passed by their followers through almost light-proof slits. The hermits meditated in total darkness and total silence for periods of up to 20 years, sometimes for the remainder of their lives. The main reward for this harsh discipline was a visionary experience. It's highly unlikely that any of us are going to go that far, but some of the less spectacular disciplines may not be out of the question. First among these is fasting. Prolonged fasting has been used by visionaries for centuries. As a technique, it has an appealing simplicity, and it's not nearly as uncomfortable an experience as the well-fed might imagine. Assuming you are fit enough to take it, and the only way to make sure of this is to check up with a doctor first, by far your best start is the 3-day fast, and anything less tends to give you most of the unpleasantness and almost none of the benefits. So he goes into how to fast, which I'm sure most of you know how to do that. Talking about fasting more. Day 3, we usually produce the benefits. But here's the thing, and we got to do the radio break so we can pay for the licensing and stuff, but that's coming up next. But here's the thing, like if you watch a dark song or that movie, or you read into any of these grimoires that have 3-month, 4-month rituals, whatever, to me, that's not really proof, because I'm not saying that it's not real, but if you're looking for proof, that's not really the direction you want to go. If you're trying to have an experience and you're a void walker, then do all of it. And that way, you know the truth about your experience. But if you starve a person enough, they're going to start having experiences. If you get sleep deprivation, you're going to have experiences. If you take drugs or any other chemicals, you're going to have experiences. There's all kinds of different things you can do that affect the mind. You got to remember that. This is why I try to stick to basic ceremony every day, and then just regular, as I'm falling asleep, try to get into the etheric body and maybe the astral realm. Because to me, it proves more than going to, just taking ayahuasca or going, I'm not saying that's bad either, I just haven't done it, or going so far as to fast forever or a sleep deprivation, whatever you're doing to try to have an experience. What I want typically is to be able to have an experience without having to change all that stuff. I mean, am I asking too much? Am I asking, do I want my cake and eat it too? Is that what's going on? I've had one, so I don't think that's out of the ordinary, too much to ask. All right. So coming up next is the radio station break for our sponsors and some drops, and then we'll be back. We will finish this text tonight, come hell or high water, and we'll look at maybe some of what you're talking about in chat. You can also call in at 501-777-5631. Just because we're reading or whatever doesn't mean that you can't participate in the show. You can feel free to interrupt me. Even if I don't pick up the phone, leave a voicemail. Usually I'll call you back or I'll hit you back and let you know why. I've been looking at the phone a lot more lately. I'm going to be honest with you. Been doing a good job. What I'm really doing. What are you really doing? Trying to finish this book. That's what the hell I'm really doing. Make sure you join our Telegram and Discord and all that good stuff. All right, y'all. Stay with us.
I'm Clyde Lewis. You're listening to The Fringe FM.
Have you ever wondered, what do the stars say for me? Or, will the next month or the next year be more favorable? How about, are our two signs compatible? Each month, at the new moon, you can ask these questions live with me, your astrologer psychic, Mary DeCina, along with host of Lighting the Void, Joe Root. Join us at the new moon for Cosmic Conditions. We look forward to working with your energy.
Every new moon at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fringe FM.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute? When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's
just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
All right, class. Let's hear what everyone did this weekend. Jill?
Well, I raised my older sister to a big oak tree. It was at least 100 years old. My mom said I must have set a record or something. And then we went down by a stream and perched up on this huge rock and saw all of these little minnows swimming around way below us. And then I rescued my little brother from an evil slug king who was guarding him in the bush fortress. And my sister and I brought him back to our super twig fort for safety. And then we all laid out and told stories until it got dark. And the Big Dipper led us all the way home.
Awesome. Where were you, Jill?
Yeah. We went to the forest. It's not that far away. Anyone want to come this weekend?
Ask your parents to take you and your friends to the forest this week and find the fun, adventurous you. It's closer than you think. Check out discovertheforest.org.
Live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one about his religion. Respect others and their views, and demand that they respect yours. Love your life. Perfect your life.
Beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and of service to your people. When your time comes to die, be not like those whose hearts are filled with fear of death, so that when their time comes, they weep and pray for a little more time to live their lives over again in a different way. Sing your death song and die like a hero, going home.
Hi, this is Kronox from Belgium, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Hate when I do that. Muted. All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void Radio here live on the Fringe FM. Make sure you, like Michael did, thank you so much, Michael, keep supporting us so we can keep doing this. I'm trying my hardest not to just tear this thing down to a once-a-week podcast. But I might have to for a little while until things pick back up. I'm just telling you. But some of the people that support have, I mean, you guys are, I don't know what to say. Like, I talk about it all the time, but it's a lot of the same people, and you know who you are. Thank you guys so much. And if you haven't, you can grab a T-shirt. You can just share the show, talk about it. Go to the Fringe FM. There's stores. We got services there if you want to do your own podcast show. Now, that's audio or video. I'm going to change everything there. And you need a personal producer to help you move along the process, or an assistant, all that stuff. Even if you want to do a show and take phone calls, we have services there too. We've got all kinds of ways that you can benefit from helping the Fringe FM, from getting your own Tatwa cards to producing your own content. God knows everybody wants to. I talk to a lot of people that want to produce their own content, as you should. You should be expressing yourself. You should be putting light into the void, not keeping it all to yourself, even though it's, great to, I create certain things just for me, but that's for my mind. That's to keep me at peace. So this guy's getting into some weird stuff. 501-777-5631. I'm not saying it's weird. I understand all of it, but he's already admitted that he doesn't really know a lot about like the occult or any of this stuff. And he's I don't know, he's putting a lot out there is what I'm saying that he doesn't know about. And I do agree. You could just talk about all this stuff and say it's dangerous, but you're kind of telling people to do it in a way, aren't you? I mean, he gets into fasting, but that's okay. Fasting is just fasting. Talks about the psychological effects of it. Yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to get into that. It's pretty boring. We all know about how fasting works. If you want to see like all of the things that occultists do to push the boundaries of consciousness, you could just watch the movie A Dark Song, which, I mean, that one is kind of, it's edgy. I personally haven't went there. I don't do that kind of stuff. I'm not judging it. It's just not my bag, Everybody's always asking those big questions about fasting or hallucinogens or sex magic and all this other stuff. Well, let's just go over those three things, right? And hopefully we can stop the questions here if you're going to ask me about it. If you do want to have the best possible chance of having an etheric out-of-body projection, you don't need to have a bunch of heavy food on your body. You need to be as light as possible, and your energy needs to be balanced. Not too freaking tired, and not all Adderalled or coffeeed out either. You need to be level, hallucinogens, I took them when I was younger, tried DMT not too long ago. Haven't really done them for spiritual experiences. I'm just going to be honest. I did them to explore consciousness. I guess that's a spiritual experience. And sex magic is not even, like, there's tantra and alchemy. There's something that you do with a partner, like a life partner, someone you love that's on the same level as you, which I'm totally into. And then there's, ejaculation for the purpose of tapping into ejaculation just so you can tap into that source so you can get a car or something. Not judging it. It's just not my thing. All right. Hopefully that was direct enough for you so we don't have to talk about that anymore. You shouldn't go there. Not right now. I just say, man, lots of people ask me about that. And have been. All right. So we're reading the book by J.H. Brennan called The Astral Doorways. He says a faster but infinitely more difficult road to the astral world is lack of sleep. I knew he was going to go to this one too, sleep deprivation. I don't think that's the astral world. I think that's the brain getting tired. That's your brain getting tired. Hell, I've stayed up to the point where I was just giggling, delirious, seeing colors and stuff. That is not, to me, a spiritual experience. However, some people take it that way. I think it's, you know what I think it is? I think it's this idea that in order for me to have a spiritual experience, I need to detach from the physical body or subject myself to not normal physical conditions, because the two don't go together. But I'm telling you, it's like they do go together. You just happen to be in a body right now. You don't have to draw away from it so much. I will say this, though, before he gets into the whole sleep deprivation thing, which I don't think qualifies, this is my opinion, as definitely not an ethereal projection, but, tones definitely work. Binaural beats, hemisync, putting one tone in one ear and another tone slightly in a different ear to sync the hemispheres of the brain together, that works that's something that you can do to help focus your experience. So say you got a set of Tatua cards or a tarot or crystal ball, whatever you use, and you put tones in your ear, you could probably do that. There are just certain solid tones that will, hell, I remember Dan Lopez sent me some solid tones that I listened to long enough and I felt myself sliding out the damn chair. But I think there's a delicate but good technique to this. I think the Monroe Institute, especially back in the day, figured this out because that's why they patented HemiSync. But they didn't just put the two tones in their audios. You can listen to both of the introductory exercises on YouTube. They also put in white noise, waves, a little bit of white noise, kind of that wah-wah white noise, along with the two tones to sync the two hemispheres of the brain together. But also, what else did he use in that? The ocean waves, lots of rhythmic stuff that they blended all very well together in those first beginning audios. Now, if you, no offense or nothing, but you get those audios, they're just not done well enough, in my opinion, for me to listen to them, because it's just some music that they bought probably off a splice or something, and then they put the tones in the background, or they made them on their keyboard. But when old school Monroe and all of them were doing it, they had all kinds of stuff in there. You could take those. I'm just telling you right now, I'll leave the links in this video. Once I put all the description and stuff up, the free exercise and the introductory exercise to the out-of-body experience that the Monroe Institute does, and just put headphones on. That's important. You can't just lay your phone down or listen to it on the speakers. You got to have a set of stereo headphones on and lay down and listen to those, and it will be a whole different experience. What? Sleep deprivation. Sorry. Where the hell is it? I just was looking at it. He's still talking about fasting. Maybe he's talking about the two. This technique is favored by the Middle Eastern dervishes and members of the European witch cult. In both cases, whirling movements are incorporated in traditional dance. Okay, he's talking about something different now. A faster but infinitely more road to the astral is lack of sleep. Tolerance varies, but 3 or 4 completely sleepless nights will usually produce visions with a vengeance. That's not astral travel. That's hallucinating. The experience, I mean, I'm sure you could blend the two together if you were focused on having a spiritual experience, for sure. But you're telling people, just stay up for 4 days. Now you got people going out there chopping up lines of meth or eating Adderall, saying, I'm going to go into the astral. You got to be careful the way you word stuff, man. So the experience may have a certain interest in itself, but the disorientation which accompanies it, the adverse psychological reactions, and if prolonged, the heavy price paid in terms of health loss makes the technique far from useful. Yeah, well, that's why speed addicts have lemon faces, you know. You see the old classic lemon face. They usually got the sunken in cheeks, not these healthy fat cheeks like you're supposed to have. It's sunk in, and their teeth start having tooth problems, and they fall out because they ain't sleeping. They're not getting enough rest. Their brain's on overdrive all the time. Brain stimulation can be just as addictive as anything. Why do you think we like coffee so much? I don't think it's a spiritual experience, so that's all I'm saying. Not in itself. It can be accompanied with a spiritual journey, though. While prolonged fasting, for all its drawbacks, can at least be channeled to spiritual ends, lack of sleep cannot. Well, he agrees with me there. Your concentration will not hold up, unless, like the saint, your interest is one pointed to the degree of saturation. Little worthwhile can come from this technique. But through the ages, faster technical methods of inducing trance have been developed. One of them is whirling. This technique is favored by the Middle Eastern dervishes and members of the European witch cult. In both cases, whirling movements are incorporated into a traditional dance. The dervishes dance free the witches in a circle. A witch circle should be no more than 9 feet in diameter, the smallest space that will enclose 13 people performing a whirling dance, and in both cases, dizziness and exhaustion lead fairly quickly to a trance collapse with subsequent visions. Whirling. Just get some headphones, man. I'm sorry, though. I will say this. This was written in the 70s. They didn't really have the technology that we have today with this stuff. There are very considerable variations on this basic theme. Voodoo possession rituals, for instance, rely on emotional tension combined with rhythmic drumming and the exhaustion of a non-whirling dance to produce similar results. Well, the Indians kind of did the same thing. But they would take peyote and they do their dances. Peyote can be a very spiritual experience, but so can a sweat lodge. Look, I'm not saying that any of these things are not spiritual. What I'm saying is if you're looking at it like A equals B, or A plus B equals C. So if I go out and I deprive myself of sleep, I'm going to astral travel. Or if I take hallucinatory drugs, I'm going to astral travel. Or I'm going to have a spiritual experience. It's not correct. You might, but more than likely, you're definitely going to hallucinate. Yeah. And I know you could come at me and be, but what is reality and our 5 senses and all this other stuff I get it. Trust me, I get it. But what we're focusing on, or at least I'm trying to focus on, is practical explorations of consciousness without hurting yourself or having to do something extreme. I should have said that from when I started this, though. But hey, void walking's void walking. If you want to go, I got no qualms with people that want to do whatever they got to do to have the experience. As long as they're not hurting anybody else, who am I to judge them, honestly? Other ingredients in the mixture are flagellation and chanting. Please, God, don't do that. Jesus. I'm ready to have a spiritual experience. It's flagellation. Investigation of these techniques shows a chemical element in many of them. Prolonged chanting, for instance, will increase the carbon dioxide content of the blood. Dancing releases adrenaline. Flagellation produces histamines, and if the wounds are left untreated, decomposed protein is absorbed back into the blood, and often in the rituals of the black races, these natural chemicals are supplemented by herbal drugs. The results are striking. Dude, what are you talking about? Once this is realized, it is a short step to the recognition of other chemical keys to the astral plane. In recent years, these have come more and more to the forefront with publicists' discovery of mescaline in the various synthetic psychedelics such as LSD-25. These are genuine keys, is a statement that will not sit easy with the romantic. They can be extremely dangerous keys, but that is neither here nor there. They can unlock inner levels efficiently and easily. And if their use seems a far cry from spirituality, I know no better answer than once given by Aldous Huxley. And one way or another, all our experiences are chemically conditioned, and if we imagine that some of them are purely spiritual or purely intellectual, purely aesthetic, it is merely because we have never troubled to investigate the internal chemical environment at the moment of their occurrence. Very true. Touché. Furthermore, it is a matter of historical record that most contemplatives worked systematically to modify their body chemistry with a view to creating the internal conditions favorable to spiritual insight. Well, so then what happens when, I understand what you're saying. Touche, good comeback. But wouldn't it be cool if you didn't have to do all that, is what I'm saying. Wouldn't it be cool if you just knew how to work with the energetic waves in your body? Or if you could use just some tones or something and have almost the same experiences without having to change the chemicals in your body or do something so drastic that you're no longer consciously coherent, or I don't want to say in control. There's another word for it. I just can't think of it. That's a little bit more healthy for you. LSD filled Tim Leary with a mission to turn on the world. Despite panic-stricken headlines, the world largely resisted, and I am glad. The astral plane is only one reality. Slavery to its visions is no better than the stifling scientific materialism of the Victorian days. With the Aquarian change in psychic dominance, more and more Westerners are turning to magic and occultism, taking an interest in mysticism and inner states. This has led to much a greater awareness of yoga in the West, and since yoga disciplines in many cases are aimed at producing trance states, there's a chance you may be tempted to use the system in conjunction with the doorways. Resist that temptation. Yoga is a wonderful system, as taught in the Orient by a skilled guru. It can produce exceptional results as a do-it-yourself road to God. The typically Western position is it's bad news. Some parts of Hatha Yoga system have been adapted quite successfully for Western use, and as such, they are interesting physical training regimes, whatever. But the trance-inducing techniques of yoga are dangerous without proper training and expert supervision. So leave them alone, no matter how many tempting books on the subject come to hand. Yeah, you're going to expect people to do that now, you're crazy. There's so many freaking books on that now. You're just going to tell people to leave them alone. They're going to do what they want to do. And on no account try to mix visualizations with yoga postures. Combining the two is a technique on its own. To try it without knowing what you're doing is asking for psychosis. Apart altogether from yoga, there are a few body postures which tend to produce trance in themselves, and probably the oldest of these is the shaman squat. This involves squatting on the ground with hands clasping ankles and head resting on the knees. The position looks something like an upright fetus and becomes extremely uncomfortable after a time, but maintaining long enough it leads to trance. A second equally comfortable and equally effective method is the Sufi development of hanging by one's wrist with the feet clear of the ground. Dude, what? Properly used, the mantra can be an effective trance producer. Chanted aloud, two things happen. Blood and carbon dioxide rises, and the sonorous rhythm takes a hypnotic grip on the mind. There is an added benefit that properly understood, the mantra will turn the mind in specifically spiritual directions. Please don't do any of this. If one of you guys calls me and says, hey, you know what? I hung myself in my room by my wrist and flagellated myself, and you know what? I had a hell of an experience. Please, just don't say that it came from this show. We're just reading books here. What's up, Mike? I heard the hemisync tones they use on the Gateway tapes aren't the ones they originally developed. I've listened to Tom Campbell's own binary tracks and they feel different. Well, I have the original developed ones. They may have changed them. But you don't need those. I'm just telling you, you can use the two tracks that are on YouTube are the original tracks. The two introductory, it's the same thing. It's the one Monroe they made back then. It's not a real special formula, but it does sound different. I'll tell you why. And it has something to do with sound in itself. One, nowadays they're using MP3s. If you've got the original tracks from the Gateway experience, it would be more of like, what's it called? It's not MP3. It's a whole, it's not even a WAV file. It's the whole spectrum of sound. So even the sound waves that the human ear can't hear are put into the files so you can hear them. Just like if you were listening to a record or a vinyl record or something. So that's one reason why they sound different. MP3 is a bit more digital. Well, secondly, they didn't put all the stuff in there that they should have put in there. And yeah, Thomas Campbell was with Robert Monroe and helped him develop hemisync. So I haven't heard any of Thomas Campbell's. I should listen to them to check them out, actually. I haven't heard them. But if they're anything like the old original Monroe ones, they're probably pretty badass. Anyways, back to this. I'll get off on a tangent. An excellent example is the very well-known mantra, Om Mani Padma Hum. The usual English translation is Hail to the Jewel in the Lotus, a phrase more or less devoid of sense as it stands, but on examination you'll find the lotus is the thousand-petaled lotus, a psychic plexus at the crown of the head, and the focal point of man's dealings with divinity. Thus the mantra is a very specific salute to God. The salute should be chanted, as it were, in a circle. And he goes, Om Mani Padme Om. He does the whole chant. It is repeated until the desired effect is achieved. It is worth noting as passing that the circular mantra can be used most successfully for clearing the mind. It is begun slowly, and in this case need not be spoken aloud and repeated mentally at ever-increasing speeds. The time comes when it whirls from its own momentum, as catchy tunes sometimes do, and throws off all extraneous thoughts. That's why I like mantras. Because if you ever just meditated and you did the old Eckhart Tolle thing, which is like just sit there and focus on nothing or one thought, and if a thought comes in, take notice of it, but let it go, which is cool. But it's not going to get you to that, the zone, man. The mantras do that. If you say them enough, eventually it does start to kind of push away the mind, and then you become like one with this frequency that you're vocalizing, and you find you're not thinking about anything, and that's where you want to be. To stop a circling mantra, reverse the process that began it. First, take consciousness control of the speeding words and very gradually slow them down. When the mantra is slowed to a crawl, speak it aloud and forget it. Most of the methods outlined so far are more effective than attractive. My own belief is that hypnosis is the safest and certainly the most comfortable means of heightening the astral experience. Almost everyone can receive some benefit from the technique, and the chances of anything going very badly wrong are a good deal less than with many of the other methods. The use of hypnosis does not, of course, rule out the possibility of solitary experiments. Here, self-hypnosis becomes an effective key, and by far the easiest way to produce the self-hypnotic state is to have yourself put in trance by a skilled hypnotist who will then give you a keyword which, when you pronounce it, acts as a trigger to send you back into the trance alone. But if you prefer the undoubted satisfaction of doing things the hard way, the following technique will produce the same results over a long period of time. Find a quiet room where you will not be disturbed. Draw the curtains and dim the lights, and do not try for total darkness. A restful dim light is best, but make sure the room is warm. Nothing is more distracting than being cold or shivering. With these preliminaries done, lie down on your back on the bed and begin a systematic relaxation as outlined in Chapter 9. Or just download The Art of Relaxation from my Patreon store. Do this several times until you're sure your body is completely relaxed, and a good test is that your limbs will feel heavy. Once relaxation is achieved, begin making the hypnotic suggestions to yourself, and again these suggestions are outlined in Chapter 9. There's no need to hurry and no need to speak aloud. Repeat them over and over until the effects start to take in. Learning self-hypnosis is usually more difficult than learning to hypnotize someone else, so several sessions may well be necessary before trance of any depth is produced. You know what you could do too? You got to do this regularly, like practice it too. But what I've done is I've got certain techniques that I haven't shared yet, but path workings that I've recorded my own voice talking to myself, which I know sounds weird, but when you hear it, there's a vibration and a comfort level that's reassuring, unless you just freaking hate your own voice, which nobody really likes their voice, but you have to really hate it to not find comfort in it. I mean, just try it. Record an affirmation or some kind of mantra of your own voice, but do it confidently. And speak to yourself as if you're a parent speaking to a child. I'm not saying talk down to yourself, but in the loving, caring manner. Because realistically, that's how you should care about yourself anyways. If not, you need to get to that point. And then listen to it. You might find that it's far more comforting than listening to somebody else. And then other times, listening to other people will help too. Just depends on if you vibe with them or not. All right, so this next part, I'm going to try to wrap this up because I said we'd get done with this. Does anyone know if you have to do the toning for the gateway tapes to work? Because I've only done them at night and my walls are paper. Oh, the resonant toning. Yeah, you kind of need to, but you don't have to do it super loud, you know. You could just, when you breathe in on the resonant tuning part, you could just breathe in, and then as you let out, you don't have to be loud about it. You could just do it real low. You could just go, you could just do it real low. Unless your walls are that thin, which I don't know any apartment that's that thin. If you're sleeping beside somebody and they don't know what the hell you're doing, it's going to be weird. But you should definitely do the resonant tuning. People are going to think you're a weirdo, but that's part of it. Hell with them. Hell with them. Oh shit. Okay. So here is a quote by Max Heindel from the Rosicrucian Mysteries. Many cannot even believe that such a world exists and that other people can see that which is invisible to them. Yet, some people are blind to the beauties of this world which we actually see. That's a good point. Max Heindel, the Rosicrucian Mysteries. As an occultist, I'm committed to a number of beliefs which you probably do not share. So far in this book, I've tried to keep these beliefs as far in the background as possible. And sometimes this has not been possible. In early chapters dealing with the astral as a psychological state, it was relatively easy to keep on the rails. But the astral refuses to behave entirely as a psychological state. So that later, a degree of esotericism started to creep in. A degree? Really? The whole damn book had esotericism in it. Now nearing the end of the book, I propose to give this esotericism full play for a little while. Whether you accept a word of it is a matter for yourself. Who cares? Just tell them it works, whether they accept it or not. Why are you even worried about it? Just be honest. Should you decide to reject everything put forward from now on, it will not matter a great deal. Exactly, so why write about it? Any importance the book may have is in its presentation of techniques. Dangerous though they are in some cases, these techniques will open the astral plane to personal investigation. That is a matter of fact, not opinion. But opinions will naturally follow personal investigation. At that stage, you too may find more than a hint of esotericism creeping in. A very dear friend of mine was once offered the job of being God. It carried, he told me later, an excellent salary with some interesting perks. Among these was a house set in its own grounds and a brand new Cadillac. The duties of the job were light, but he refused. As a scholar, he knew what the Greeks meant by hubris. As a theosophist, he had the sense to avoid particularly nasty karma. This offer was made in California, where there are apparently as many man gods as there are silly groups to worship them. In other words, a very dear friend of his was offered a job of being a god. Think about that shit. What is he saying right there? A very dear friend of mine was once offered the job of being God. I'm going to read on, but I got a theory about what he's saying here. The offer was made in California, where there are apparently as many man gods as there are silly groups to worship them. Regrettably, it is the silly groups which seek and usually obtain publicity, and as a result, organized occultism has a bad name with the public. It is looked on largely as a crackpot fringe. There's that word, fringe. Crackpot fringe. Come on now. Fringes, we led the way. Without the fringe and without the fringe people, you wouldn't have shit. You wouldn't have anything cool. We'd be Quakers. All of us. But counterfeit cash should never lead us to conclude legal tender worthless. It should simply make us a little more careful about the next notes we accept. So there are, to my knowledge, Western groups which use genuine esoteric techniques. Remember, he wrote this in the 70s, so he was probably a little afraid to say, hey, I know these big-named occultists, or I know about magical orders and fraternities. I'm just saying. Nowadays, everybody, we don't care. We know they exist. By genuine, I mean simply that the techniques produce results. Sometimes these results are psychological, but no less valuable for that. And sometimes the results will manifest on other levels and may have a far greater importance to humanity than the man in the street imagines. Many of the genuine fraternities maintain a tradition of secrecy, complete with binding oaths. Those which do not still guard their privacy jealously. Missionary work and advertising are both taboo. The belief is current that when an individual is ready for initiation, circumstances will conspire to put him in touch with a group or individual equipped to give it. That's true. People, they don't go recruiting you. And it's all bullshit. And most of the time, anytime you hear people say, yeah, I had these people try to get me to join their little occult society. Well, it wasn't really an esoteric. It wasn't a real one, because they don't recruit. Because most of them believe that when the time comes, you're going to do it on your own. A common similarity between pseudo-occult groups is the tendency of both to claim origins in the distant and mysterious past. It is these claims, when made by genuine groups, which prompt me to include a mention of the lodges in a book about the astral plane. If you take the trouble to investigate the claims from a common sense viewpoint, the results are usually disappointing. Most of the elder groups were formed in the latter half of the 19th century. Others did not come into being until much later. But this is not to say the claims are fiction. To a magician or an occultist, it is the inner structure of his group that is important. That's a fact. And astral origins are not always the same as physical. Imagine the astral as a vast area stretching above space and time. Now think yourself back in Atlantis, perhaps as a priest in the sun cult. Your operations and those of your followers build up an artificial elemental on the astral plane. The ritual aspect of all religions establishes the elemental strongly. But religion, to be worth anything at all, has to go beyond the astral plane. Consequently, a vortex is built up, drawing down power from spiritual levels. The combination of physical ritual worship, emotionally fed artificial elementals, and spiritually fed vortexes is the essential basis of the sun cult. See how he's doing this? He's making it about the Atlanta sun cult instead of calling it ceremony, magic, or religion. And interacting degrees of difference in these elements means the sun cult as a human experience is unique. Atlantis sinks. The physical aspect of the sun cult is effectively cut off. Elemental and vortex become dormant. Other sun cults may arise in later cultures, but they will form their own astral points of contact with the realms beyond. Interesting. But through dormancy, the inner aspects of the original sun cult continue to exist. Now, bring your mind back to the present day. Assume a group of occultists wish for some reason to reestablish the Atlantean sun cult. Highly trained astral voyagers search the Akashic records for the rituals which gave it birth. A fresh link is forged, and the dormant elemental and vortexes are revived. A modern sun cult is established. And from the mundane viewpoint, the cult is brand new, yet the occultist can reasonably claim it has roots in prehistory. It is not just ritual and religion that can establish permanent areas of the astral plane. A skillfully presented book of a certain type can eventually do the same. Alice in Wonderland is a striking example, made all the more interesting by the strong hints that its author knew his Kabbalah. And Lord of the Rings is another. The printed form of the book becomes a permanent earthing of the original imaginative effort which created the fantasy world. Reader reactions provides the emotional stimulus which keep the characters alive in more than a figurative sense. The American author Ray Bradbury sensed something of this truth when in one of his short stories he peopled Mars with characters out of literature. Dickensian creations like Scrooge, Fagin, or Pickwick have taken on a life of their own, but what Bradbury may not have realized is that total environments also be established, or is that total environments like this may also be established in the astral realm. None of this is so wild a speculation as it may seem. A psychiatric classic concerns a scientist who began for recreation to build up a detailed fantasy world. He did the job too well, and eventually it began to obsess him. He found himself living in this fantasy to the detriment of his work. And eventually he sought psychiatric help. And after a period of treatment, he was cured, but his psychiatrist now found himself living in this guy's fantasy. Here again, you have a pointer towards an objective, or astral sphere, so to speak. And if another occult theory is correct, its importance is not limited to a few investigators. This theory holds that death releases the consciousness onto the astral plane. And you can find the textbook exposition in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but I propose to outline the essentials below. Well, it's not just the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The resurrection of Christ, Horus, Osiris, Dionysus, all of these resurrections and these reborn bodies are these astral bodies, energy bodies. While physical life endures, mind and body cooperate, and one influences the other in consciousness, at least during waking hours, which is focused on the physical world. But cooperation between the two elements of your nature will eventually break down, and in many cases you'll not have to wait until actual death to see this. As the body grows senile, there is a strong tendency for the mind to draw in on itself. Attention wanders away from here and now. The senior citizen is increasingly concerned with memories and introspections. Death completes the process. It is still possible to operate approximately within the physical environment via a body of astral substance, and those who could conceive no other form of life sometimes do. Sensitives become aware of them, and another ghost story is born. But the astral body is not really at home in the physical world. It can see and hear, usually, but cannot touch, make itself heard, or influence events. And the frustrations of a ghost with any real degree of awareness must be chronic. Fortunately, while millions die, only a handful become earthbound ghosts. Of the remainder, the vast majority sink into their own psyche and begin a life during which awareness is confined to the astral plane. It is the same astral plane we have been discussing, and the same laws of hyperphysics apply. The mind's unconscious forces manifest as an environment. The conscious mind, conditioned by 60 or 70 years of life on the physical, accepts this environment as real in the same sense that the physical world is real. And while this is a mistake, it is a mistake that is difficult to avoid. A moment's thought will tell you that how your post-mortem environment looks deeply entirely on how you are. And let us suppose, for example, your life on earth was spent within the confines of Orthodox Christianity. You kept the commandments and built into your unconscious the firm expectation of entry into heaven. After death, the astral plane would reflect your mental state. You would find literally pearly gates and an actual city paved with gold, if that was your expectation. Heavens and hells vary from individual to individual and culture to culture, but all of them have one feature in common. They last as long as it takes you to wake up to the fact that you are dreaming. I cannot resist adding that more than one occult philosopher has applied a very similar theory to physical life. Gurdjieff. For instance, Gurdjieff held that for most people, every waking moment is in fact a state of sleep. Their actions are pure reflex, and they are surrounded by a web of dreams. To wake up, it becomes necessary that they remember themselves. Gurdjieff did not see the waking as changing the world, only your awareness of it. Many occultists, notably in the Orient, have gone further with the notion that the physical world is ultimately no more solid than the astral, and as a result, the enlightened man departs, leaving the rest of us to dream on, convinced we are experiencing reality. And I think I'm going to end it there. He's got 2 techniques that we can go over later, psychometry and building the astral body. But I think it's pretty cool what he's talking about there. You know, everything is some kind of state of consciousness. And a lot of people say, life is a school and we're here to learn something. And in a way, I think we are, but I think we're here to remember, just like he's saying too. Just like when you're sleeping and you're stuck in that reality. Now, you don't even know about this reality until you wake up. You don't know the difference. And then you wake up and you're like, oh shit, that wasn't real. I think the same thing happens here. 60, 70, 80 years goes by pretty fast. 80 years or so. Really fast. And most of the stuff here has you so focused on the shit that's in it that you're trying to keep for yourself that eventually you're going to wake up from this dream and go, oh, hell, that wasn't real. So what I'm saying is while you're here, if you focus on consciousness, service to others, love, and the experience of life as an adventure, at some point you might, I'm just saying, I know this sounds crazy, I haven't, but you might actually wake up from this dream that we're in right now. The one that's really hard to wake up from, the densest one, that's densely in matter. And by working with your consciousness, that figure 8 of the spiritual world and the physical world, once it starts to really work and come together, and as synchronicities happen, and as deja vu synchronicities, people that you meet that you swear you've known before, all these kinds of things are meant to wake you up so that you remember, think about the etymology of that word, who you are. And then hopefully you'll have grown a new kind of energetic conscious body. Or you just recycle like everything else does in nature. It dies, leaves, comes back into the dream world in a similar but different form until it wakes up from the dream. See, I think everything could be a dense form of a dream. Just like some dreams, if you've ever been in a false awakening where you become lucid but you try to wake yourself up. I've done that. You could feel how deep it is. That state of consciousness where your body's asleep and you're just like trying to wake up and your eyes are shaking because you're trying to wake up. Think about that when you think about this place. What if this place is an even deeper place of sleep, deeper than that? And the only way to wake up is to explore things consciously, to love, to treat other people the way you want to be treated, to look at life as an adventure with a childlike heart. And slowly but surely you start waking up and remember who you are. And then when you leave and go into the astral, you don't die the second death and you come back, you'll be just like Christ. Man, I know what I'm here for. It must be about my Father's business. I remember who I am. But no, most people say, oh, we're in this prison planet and this prison this and prison that. Look, there's going to be another prison planet somewhere else in the universe that your soul is going to incarnate in this mass, and it might not be a physical body like a humanoid. It might be something, who the hell knows? But you are going to keep dealing with the physical world because consciousness wants to live. It wants light and it wants life, and that's what it's working on. There's no way out of it. Sorry. So you might as well get with the program and help it, you know. Think about it. If this was real, what I'm saying, and we all woke up, we could turn all kinds of planets into heavens and cool places to go. Hell, we could leave our bodies under a tree and go to another place and then come back. Just saying, I know it sounds nuts, but anyways, gotta roll out. We'll be here tomorrow night. Don't forget the call-in show where you get your live reading for free from Mary Ducina. I've vetted so many psychics, tarot readers, you name it. There is no one that is legit as Mary Ducina. Nobody that I've found. And we'll be here on the 6th to give you a free reading if you call in to go over your signs, all that stuff. We do it every new moon. The perfect time when the moon turns dark, you finish the cycle and you can start a new one and start to bring stuff into your existence again. Thanks for listening and hanging out with us tonight. If you can support the Fringe FM, go to fringe.fm. That is the URL. Fringe, www.fringe.fm. Good night, y'all. Sweet dreams. Love you. Give us a, I guess, I don't know, a donation or something. A like, a thumbs up, grab a t-shirt.